Now, I've given you the dictionary definition of sequence, and I've given you my definition of sequence. I would like to say right now that when you have perfect sequence, it's when the passage that you're playing and the one you're connecting with it are sequential in every way. That is, they're the same identical two bars. You play two bars, and when you follow that with two bars that are exactly the same, that would be perfect sequence in every respect. But we don't do that. We use what we call near perfect sequence. And that is where, if we say we have two measures that we're using, and think of that as the original measures, and if we're going to create two new measures, but we want those two new measures to be related to the first two in a sequential sort of way, we would strive to have that sequence in one or two areas. Maybe it's the same rhythm in the new two measures, or maybe it's the same harmony, or maybe it's the same melody. But it wouldn't just be identical. If you just went through playing the same two measures all the time, it would be very boring. Or even if it had a great amount of sequence in it all the time, because it then is no longer unpredictable. One of the charming things about improvising is to create surprise, and there's no surprise in just a lot of sequence. Well, why do we want sequence in the first place? We want sequence because without it, the music is not joined. There's no connecting tissue. There's nothing there that gives it continuity, that makes one thing related to the next. So we want all of the song to sound related. We want it to be of the same style, but we don't want exactly the same notes. So we want some kind of sequence in our playing, but not all sequence, nor do we want to use sequence all the time. Now, let's get right into an example of rhythmic sequence. Here is an example I have written for you, and I want you to study it, analyze it, play it, and see why and how it is rhythmic sequential. 3, 4. Now that was a rhythm sequence pattern, and what I did was I established the first two bars of that as the original using a particular syncopated pattern. And every two measures throughout that 8, I played the same rhythm pattern. The chords changed, the notes changed, but the rhythm stayed the same. Every two bars was a sequence of the first two measures, and it was only sequential from the standpoint of the rhythm. So that's a good example to study and to consider when you're playing, that you can change the harmonies and change the melodies while the rhythm stays constant. Now, here is an example of a melodic sequence where what I am going to play in the first two measures will be duplicated sequentially in the two bars that follow and in the two bars that follow that. Melodically, it will be the same, but it will not have the same rhythm or the same harmony. So here we go. 3, 4. Now that was an example of melodic sequence. And what I did was I established a melody on the first two measures, which were C. Then I went to two measures of D7. And what I did in C, I did in D7. That is, namely, I played a series of notes in a scale in C, and I played the same kind of notes in D7. Then I went to G7 for two measures, and I played a scale-like melody in that. Each chord received the same melodic treatment, although the rhythm pattern was different for every two measures, and the harmony kept changing. But if you felt and sensed a relationship of all of the music in that example that hung together and sounded joined together, the reason for that was because it was melodic sequence. Here's an example of a harmonic sequence pattern. Now in this I use 3 chords, F major 7, G minor 7, A minor 7. And I create a 2-measure pattern. And then I play 2 more measures and 2 more measures until I've played 8 measures using these same chords, F major 7, G minor 7, A minor 7. But each time I play them, I change the voicing. I'm using the same chords throughout, but every 2 measures, the harmonic sequence is the same, but I change the rhythm. And there is no melody in this. So here is the example. 3, 4. I've discussed sequence in the 3 elements of music that we have, which is rhythm, melody, and harmony. And I encourage you to begin to develop using sequence in each of these areas one at a time. Work on rhythm for a while and try to make your playing more rhythmically sequential. And then take on perhaps melodic sequence and make your melodies more sequential as you go from one progression to another, from one chord to another. And then also your harmonic sequence can be worked on and developed. And then try to play some things where you're using 2 elements for sequence. Now, when you get to where you're able to create perfect sequence or very close to everything being highly sequential, you want to draw back from that point because, as I mentioned earlier, if everything is too sequential, too much of the time, it's too predictable. There are no surprises. People know what's coming next, and even though you're capable of doing this, it creates boredom for the listener, and you want to have some surprises. One area, even if you're working in music that is highly sequential, whether it's your music or someone else's or something you're inventing at the moment, one good area to sort of break out of the sequence pattern is the turnaround. The turnaround occurs at the 7th and 8th measures of a song and at the 15th and 16th measures. These places give you the opportunity to break out of that mold. So remember, continue to create sequence in your playing, but not so much that people are bored by it, but enough that all of your music sounds related. And it's a lot of fun, and it will really help you to be a better improviser.